IVM.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashdin, Doctor, your habit coach. And today with me, I have an absolutely fantastic guest. Okay. I was on her podcast. She's a fellow podcaster on IVM. And it was one of the most interesting podcasts that I've ever been on because I was just told this one thing. We need a guest. And I was like, yeah, I'm a guest. I can go for it. And I was told, all I want you to do is I want you to write on a sheet of paper, fill up the entire sheet of paper with something that you're writing. So I was like, all right. So now I have to obviously put my best foot forward. I have to make myself sound like interesting and intellectual. So I thought about what I was writing and I wrote it down. And then when I entered the studio, there I have this giggly lady sitting in front of me. And I handed my sheet of paper, it almost felt like an examination that I was in for. And she took one look at it and put it on the side. And I was like, you're not going to read it? Like I spent like half an hour writing that and she didn't even read it. And we had a fantastic discussion that followed. So what I was told was that the person hosting the podcast is a graphologist because I had no idea what to expect. And Aditi Surana, who hosts the Absolutely Right podcast, talks about graphology and understanding it and understanding people using it. Now, I wanted to have her on my show because she looked at my handwriting and told me things that I didn't know about myself. And I found it fascinating. So without much ado, Aditi, welcome to the Habit Coach podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I've been waiting to be on this show. I love your shows. I keep listening to it. And now the fact that it is coming every day, I am fascinated also because I wonder how you're going to create so much of content and teach people so much every day. I know the kind of commitment it takes. So great job, Ashdin. That's
Absolutely.
amazing.
Thank you. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
And then Saturday, Sunday, we have to give the listeners a break because they have to recover from this onslaught of Habit Coach podcast. So, what's interesting is that like you started your own podcast, you went through this whole journey, correct? And you are talking about something that's so interesting. I don't think I've ever heard about a podcast on graphology. Also, I don't think I've ever heard about what graphology
I was
was,
about to say.
right?
I was about to say, yes.
So, Aditi, what is graphology?
So I get this a lot. People ask me if I am a graphic designer or if I deal with graphs by analyzing them for stock market and all of that. But graphology is actually studying graphs underneath your handwriting strokes. Now I know
Graphs underneath your handwriting strokes.
yes, because every time you write, we have 800 permutations and combinations of the writing. So you have pressures, you have spacing between your letters, you have the way you dot your I's and cross your T's. You have so many things that make your handwriting unique. So initially when I learned about it, I thought, it's one of those things people do and how is it even relevant? And I was a skeptic to begin with.
Yeah.
But when I saw the kind of analysis and information it could give, I was sold. And it has been 16 years now. So I've been at it and it has been like one of the most, for me, it's like a life-changing journey, but one of the most fascinating psychoanalytical tools I have come across.
So 1 minute. So that there's lots to unpack. One is you were skeptical, right? So what made you get into it in the first place? Like if you were skeptical about it.
So I'm a dyslexic, Ashdin.
Okay.
So being a dyslexic, you do not look at the world the same way you do.
Correct.
So I remember being in a personality development class, the course, and my teacher asked us to draw some zeros. Now, I don't know what happened. I started looking at everybody's zeros, the way they had drawn, and suddenly I started talking about their personality. And I said, oh, your cupboard is like that, your relationships are like that. And we were all shocked and surprised because it was accurate, but I had no clue why I was talking about it. So I felt that was like, how if you're supposed to be an artist in the future, suddenly you draw something that turns out really good. That was my moment of glory. And I said, okay, if that's happening, I really have to, everybody started recognizing me for the first time. So imagine a dyslexic child, nobody had any clue about. Suddenly you have this newfound superpower and people want to come and talk to you.
Wow.
So that was my first moment of indulgence, to be very honest.
You turned into a savant, like swoosh. I can tell you about you just from your zeros. Oh God, okay, that's crazy.
And imagine like a teenager, right? So for me, I used to read a lot. My dad was a book collector more than reading. He collected books, so I used to read them. So I got reading psychiatrist and psychologist very early on, and then that, how you connect things, like you read something and you really want to apply it. That became the journey on the
Okay.
side, along with other interests that I had. But I became a graphologist because of a dramatic event, because I was studying this and I was really keen, and I could see my future in it, because I learned graphology is a well researched subject in
Okay.
Europe, not in India as much, but in Europe, they used to use it for selection. In Germany, they've done a lot of research around this topic. So when I understood that it could be a serious career, I really wanted to become a graphologist. And my father, who was an artist and a South Indian communist father, looked at it and was like, "What is this? You can't be doing this." And he thought it's future predictive stuff. Communists have like a very strong point of view about this. So he totally dismissed the whole idea. And I tried my best, with my basic logic and all of that. So he said, "No, you can't be a graphologist." And I'm like, "No, it's not like you can't. I want to do this." That was my first time I disagreed with my father openly, very clearly. I said, "No, I think I want to do it." He said, "If that is the case, make your decision and deal with the consequences. Don't live in my house."
Huh.
And I thought he was kidding in the first moment, but he wasn't. So I literally packed my bags that night. It was 2004. And I had to become a professional graphologist, because then I had jumped in, and then I had like this journey to take on my own. And then it happened, like, basically. So I became a professional graphologist because I jumped in without knowing what exactly I was getting in.
Crazy. So one hint that happened in childhood, followed by one dramatic event that happened with your father, pushing you out, I think, put you on this path. Interesting.
And
Fascinating.
also, it just felt right. I know, like, when teenagers say this, or like an 18-year-old telling you that this feels right, you're like, "Ah, right, of course. After 2 years, you're going to forget about it and you're going to get into something else." I
Correct.
thought, actually, I'm like, what if I only do this for 2 years? And I was okay with it. I was okay with experimenting with it for, like a small period. And because I really liked it. But when I got into it, it just kept opening doors. So that was really, really amazing how you feel like people respond to it, like,
Yeah.
others respond to what you do. That was fascinating.
So one thing led to another, and then this just started growing and growing and growing for you.
Yes.
Fascinating. Okay, so I want to come back to that story for sure. But like, what the other thing that I wanted to unpack was this whole thing about there are 800 different things to think about of understanding your handwriting. Now, see, like, this is me just talking. I have no idea about graphology, right? Like, I never cared about my handwriting.
Right.
I know people who have been anal about the way that they approach their handwriting, right? I've known people who have their mothers whack them for not getting the handwriting right.
Of course.
So are these the things that you are also noticing in the handwriting? Are these aspects of the personality that come out? Like, how
Like
does it work?
mother whacking, no. But
Mother whacking.
but if you look at that, like, remember how we learned to write. There was one teacher teaching you how to write on the board, and you were merely copying the strokes. Your job was to really take these strokes and copy them for what they were.
Correct.
But what made you choose your handwriting, which was different from your friend's writing? Technically, the entire class was copying from the same person. So all of us should have had the same script or same font in that sense. We don't. So in that simple copying and pasting process, you start twisting your strokes in the way you express yourself. Now, this is all very deeply rooted with our choices. So we do not know why we make the eyeball movement the way we do. We do not know why you prefer eating your favorite dish at the beginning of your meal or end of the meal. We don't have those preferences thought through. Similarly, handwriting is one thing that you haven't thought through. But that doesn't mean it is not your choice. So these are micro choices. And if more you study behavior and also psychoanalysis, you understand the micro choices are more honest than what we do consciously. When you're aware that if I speak like this, you will think that I am learned or I'm intellectual, whatever, which you tried with the writing sample. So these are conscious choices. And one of the reasons I never read what people write is because that's a conscious choice. The words that you use is conscious. Whereas the way it is written is subconscious. It is, after a point, you can't control it. So the real personality or real data is there, is
Okay.
in your micro choices, and is applicable to all of us. We say, I'm very happy, and if your face and that if you're judgmental about the happiness of the other person, it shows in some or other way.
Yeah.
And that is actually true compared to what we say or what we think we want to project.
Interesting. So it is the subconscious stuff that is coming out. It is almost like your micro expressions, your body language, which you're not conscious about, that is coming out.
Exactly.
And, right. And when you're writing, I know that there is a big brain hand connection, right? Which is
Yes.
why we talk about journaling, write down your goals, write, don't type, don't record, write. So what is happening here? Brain, hand, is it an expression
Brain,
of the brain?
hand, motor skills, nervous system, all of this goes through that entire process. Also, writing is like this constant editing that we go through. So if you want to write a sentence, you think 5 sentences, and one sentence you settle on. And by the time you write, you're very, very clear about those words that you are choosing there. You're clear about it. You're clear about your thought underneath. Now, that process by itself is cathartic, as we all know. That's why journaling is so powerful.
Yeah.
So I also believe very strongly that we all have our answers. So many times we create these clouds and we cannot see it for what it is.
Yes.
So bodies are honest. People lie. So, anytime when you think you're strong, but when you really get to do the push-ups and you realize that I don't have that core strength, suddenly you'll realize, okay, I lack this and I really have to work on it. But you may think something else about yourself, but body won't lie to you. Similarly, handwriting is a physical function. So by the time the thought becomes physical and you actually write it, it comes out with all that is happening in around the area of motor skill area of your brain, and it captures all of it and throws it out unknowingly. So it's not that even when people send handwritings for analysis, they think that sample talks about it. But any scribble, any doodle, even so many times I visit galleries, so the way the artists choose their style also talk about the way who they are and their personality. So it is every choice on the paper which I specialize in, but fundamentally every choice that we make is giving us a way in if somebody can decode it.
Fascinating. So this is used how? Like, how would you? What's a practical way of using graphology in
Back
life?
in the day, people used to use it for selection. So imagine you have 5 candidates. That's a very famous thing to do. So people used to get like 5 people's handwriting and look at it. I tried initially in my career. I hired graphologists. I trained them, and I thought, okay, we will bring this selection method of analyzing people. Over a period of time, I realized one, I'm not interested in it. I'm not interested in putting those thappas. So it's not fun for me. Second way is assessment. So if you're working with a team and if you can assess them and you can decide the training need of your team, it is easier. You can find the most important one and you can go around. So that really helps. One thing people use it for is the criminal, aspect of it. So they want to analyze the criminal's writing and who was the person behind it, what was his personality, what was the thinking behind it. Again, I tried those aspects. Again, not fun. I didn't enjoy it. So I realized I don't like the labeling part of it. What I enjoy the most is the journey. So if I see a person at some point, then the fact that we can walk with the person and we can move to the next destination and see the transformation, I'm fascinated by transformations. So I chose to combine it with coaching, and coaching became my way of approaching graphology. So the feedback came, but I would not give you all the feedback because I'm not analyzing you. I'll only speak about things that we require to work on. So I believe you don't have to turn a lotus into a rose by cutting every possible petal, but you really cut only whatever is required for the person to be at its best. As I told you, I believe that we already have answers. So, if you remove the blocks, if you kind of get the issues out of the way, the person knows how to function. Like the water technically knows how to flow. You don't have to teach it. You just have to remove the obstacles in between.
Correct.
So I started using handwriting as a way to have deep insights into personalities to coach people. And that became my interest.
And tell me, how does this work? So you use the handwriting to figure out what are the changes that are particularly needed in the person, right?
Begin
And
with.
then you use the handwriting also to change it, or
Yes.
do you use another form of coaching to change it? How does it work?
So this is like the most difficult part of my work that people
Okay.
genuinely like graphology to begin with. It's like people are like, what is this? Whether it works or not. But then I take this whole journey and make my life even more complicated by telling them, no, not only I can analyze you by your writing, I'm going to use handwriting to change certain aspects. It's called graphotherapy.
Hmm.
So the coaching format that I was talking about, I created my method of coaching called grapho coaching, which means I use graphology to analyze you. But more importantly, so this happened. Okay, my mother was diagnosed with diabetes part type 2 when I started this work, and I was doing my research initial part, and I came across this concept of graphotherapy. It's not mine; it was already there. I just took those parts and researched it further. So my mom, when she was suffering and she was, like exploring, being, initial parts, you're scared, you're reading about diabetes a lot, you're figuring out
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
require to do.
Correct.
So in that period, I thought if it is stress related and if it is about specific anxieties, can we go and change certain strokes and create calmness?
Lovely.
Now, that was a logical approach, inquiry more than a solution. So I
Correct.
created 2, 3 strokes and I said, okay, let's practice this for 6 months because that was my new part. And I'm like, okay, let's figure this out. And then she is very, very dedicated as a student. So she went on for it, practiced every day, filled books and books of that stroke that I taught her. Within 6 months, a doctor was surprised that her sugar levels were really, really balanced. And
Wow.
we were like shocked. Then we realized, okay, what if we continue this? So for 2 years, she continued the practice and she's never gone back to her medicines since then. So it's almost 15 years now. So that
Wow.
was my first success or first, exploration on this. And I was mesmerized. I'm like, if this is possible, I really want to explore. So I went in and made everybody possible around me, my guinea pigs, my college friends, my cousins, my sibling, everybody was like on graphotherapy because I wanted to figure out whether it works or not, including myself.
Correct.
And it did repetitively. So as a professional, I started changing certain strokes without telling people what we are working on.
Okay.
So if you don't know, for example, if somebody is really concerned about failing and it has fear of failure, and that is like, how it plays, any fear that you're subjected to, you really keep thinking about that one thing all the time. So I worked with 5 people, and fear of failure being a common thing, many people had it. So I started working graphotherapy way without telling them that this is what I'm working on. But when I met them again and again over a period of 5, 6 months, in their conversations, they started telling me that how I said, what has changed? When they described it, they were actually improving fear of failure. And for me, I realized that the graphotherapy can work without involving the cognitive discussion. So, do I use other techniques? Yes, I have. I got trained by by multiple amazing trainers around the world to become a coach. So, I've done
Okay.
multiple coaching certifications. I'm also certified to analyze personalities and different psychological models, including Carl Jung's MBTI model and 16 PS. So, I actually gathered all of that. That brought graphology more credible way of presenting, because otherwise it looked like I can talk about yourself and this is what it is, but then it became more psychological and with all these aspects after the training, I feel.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating. Very dangerous you are, huh? Like you can find out about all the people that are murdered also at one end from the criminal side. And then you can also understand my personality. I love it. Okay. How does this coaching work? Tell me a little bit more about it. I'm intrigued. Like
So coaching, so it begins with analysis. So it's very, very important that I feel, and I think we spoke about this in our conversation on the podcast. So I feel that we're driven by goals most of the time. We believe that I want to reach this destination and we put our resources to it. I'm a process person. Like if I'm doing that stroke, I love processes. And I think you do too, because for you, habits are the processes that you're
correct,
committing
absolutely.
to.
It's your system.
And yeah, system, and systems will take you or become your character tomorrow. So I believe that when we look at a specific problem, I ask the person to create an aspect list. An aspect list is where you do not write where you want to go, but you write what is the essence that you want to experience when you reach there.
Mm.
Now, when you get clarity around it, it takes like 5 or 6 attempts to get that clarity at times.
Mm.
So when you get, so the simple question for even the listeners to keep in mind, that what aspects do I require to create in my life, or what aspects do I desire to create in my life? Now, when you ask that questions, you realize, okay, my goal could be to become this manager or this,
Mm.
CEO. But
Mm.
when I look at what aspects, I want to experience leadership, I want to experience clarity, I want to experience authority.
Mm.
Now, these are the aspects. Now, authority, leadership, commitment, you can experience right away. You don't have to
Correct.
wait for a goal to be completed, or reaching a destination is not important.
Right.
So once people get that clarity, then I start employing coaching and graphotherapy methods. So it's like a 3 to 4 months process that we
Mm.
run.
Mm.
Sometimes it is 45 days process where we use like certain smaller issues. If somebody does not have that kind of problem, or even the aspect list is not very strong, then
Mm.
we go for a smaller process. But coachings are offered at different levels. So you have monthly coaching, you have proper high performance coaching, so that everything is
Lovely.
focused and driven by graphology.
Okay, after this podcast, we're going to have a conversation on this.
Okay.
I think like the best thing a coach can do is hire another coach. So I've been looking out for somebody. I find this quite fascinating. Okay, I'm going to check this out
I
for
hear
sure.
you. I always believe that if you don't get, also I feel it's very impersonal. So it's not my opinion over yours. It's literally
Yeah,
like what handwriting says. So that puts you into a very neutral zone to
correct.
work with people.
And you have to constantly be learning and improving yourself, right? You have to be putting in that effort and that
But
work.
Ashdin, I
And
feel that's amazing about you. Like I told you this in the beginning also. I'm like, it's fascinating to see keeping your personality, and because I've seen your handwriting, both of them in mind, the fact with the kind of you're not easy to move around. You're
mm,
very clear and you're very dedicated. So that's why you can carry your habits for a very long period of time and you can stick to it. So with that level of firmness, and also at times being stubborn about your decisions,
mm,
if you're willing to change and if you're willing to question, it takes more work than otherwise, which people
yeah.
don't understand. It's not easy for you to follow habits,
Mm,
compared to other people. You really question it, you really have to research. The habits have to prove you other, all of that has to happen.
correct.
For you, that is, I think, is the tough part that people might not see, but I can vouch for it, that for you to follow a habit and stick to it, and it has to convince you completely.
Correct.
So that's
Absolutely.
amazing.
And like I keep telling people, like all the habits that I talk about, if I have not done, I cannot talk about with authority,
Yeah.
right? So you have to go into that process of doing it, experimenting with it, and then taking it forward. And that's
And that's the
absolutely
only
right.
way it becomes authentic. That's the
Correct.
only way you can really own up that space and you can tell people, because otherwise you will just be
Yeah.
faffing and you'll be saying something that that you are not sure about. And I
No,
agree with you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you can't talk out of your bum, like especially when you're trying to, show like what life can become for you. And this
Yeah.
the entire Habit Coach podcast is nothing but showing what your possibilities could be, right? And I think,
At a micro level, like what is interesting, that's mostly when people look at changing their life, they
hmm,
really believe I have to go through this tremendous shift and it's going to cost me this much, and I have to break away from the relationship. Like, for example, for me it was very dramatic to leave my house.
right,
That wouldn't have happened, and I wonder how my life would have shaped up. But that's not always the case.
no,
Most goals and most journeys can be created and defined without having those dramatic moments, like Bollywood moments, as I call it. You can
correct.
really make small changes on a daily basis and move forward.
Yeah,
It's so
the
true.
tiny stuff. So there are times when drama happens, and there are times when there's no drama happening, but you still need to be moving forward, right?
Yeah,
Drama is
right,
anyway going to either push you forward or take you back.
right,
Drama is going to do one of these two things. But
right.
the rest of your life, you have to start saying that, Baba, I still have to make progress. Otherwise, I'm
That's
standing
true.
still. And
And there is no standing still. I feel it's like swimming. You
huh,
cannot be in one position. If you're not moving forward, you're sinking. So
unless you're like me, when I swim, I water buffalo. Do you know what water buffaloing is?
I know, really, you
Just
can.
like I just like float. I float on my back, like for like hours. I can aram se float on my back. Look at the birds flying overhead. But I don't know how these lunatics go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Like, what
Just
is
to
the
tell
point in
you,
that?
that's not swimming. That's floating.
Oh God. Aditi, superb. Okay. I just want to leave the audience with three things that they can take away and probably start practicing right now. Either handwriting or aspects of life. Like I'll tell you one that I've taken out from our conversation, which is don't look at the final goal saying I need to achieve it so that I can do this, but figure out what aspect of that goal is the thing that you really want and you can live it right now. So don't
Exactly.
wait
And
for it to
also,
happen, live it
and
right now.
because people are not clear about the aspect,
Hmm.
most people have, you might have heard it again and again,
Hmm.
that people reach their destination and they're like, yaar, itna maza nahi aaya. This is not
Yeah,
as much fun as I imagined it to be. So
correct.
the journey feels worthless, or like next time you're not as excited about it because you don't see a reason why you should put all of this when you're going to reach here and it's not going to be fun.
Yes,
Like it happens a lot with people. Whereas if you know why you're doing it, it's like having clarity about your reasons to walk,
correct.
and then it is fun.
And like I've had like multiple high performers on the podcast. I've had somebody who's
Mhm.
climbed Everest, I've had somebody who's
Wow.
won bodybuilding competitions. And my favorite question to them is, how did you feel immediately after winning? And how did you feel the
Yeah.
next day?
Wow.
Right?
What is your observation?
So ecstasy at when winning, complete happiness. Next day or following days is always up kya,
What's next? Yeah, that's true. So
right?
true.
And it's not an up kya as in like yay. It's a like, oh, now what?
Yeah. Right? And
It's a
but if you
whoosh. It's a
yeah,
down
if you have
downturn.
a process that you are committed to, like
Hmm.
one of my ways of really knowing that I want to do this work is every time I talk about handwriting and
Hmm.
I look at a sample, I blush.
Hmm.
And I wish it continues, but probably when I would stop blushing, I would know that I have outgrown this. But
Very nice.
there is this flirtatious part where you're still exploring, you're still learning. Every handwriting is new to you,
Yeah.
and that newness is part of the process and not the results.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. You have to love what you're doing, not wait for like it to happen. Like who knows if
yeah.
it's going to happen? I don't know if 2021 is going to happen or not, right?
Yeah,
The
especially.
the
And
aliens are coming.
you of all the people on the podcast which we recorded, you spoke
Huh.
about the World War III coming, Aditi. What is to be unhappy about? I'm very excited about it. That's what you
Correct. Oh,
said.
I remember that. Yes. I was like, see, something dramatic is happening. I think we recorded this in Jan, Feb. When did we record this?
I think Jan,
Jan, right?
yes.
And I was telling Aditi that there is something dramatic that is about to happen. This
Right.
was when I think America and Trump were doing various things. So I
Yes.
said World War III is happening or some drama is going to happen. So who knows if we're going to be alive by the end of the year? Right now is where we have to have as much masti as possible.
Yeah, but you said I'm excited about it. And when the
And I'm
lockdown
excited
started, I'm
about
like,
it.
yeah, I did. Perfect
I,
timing to say that.
I called it. Okay, one is aspects. What are
Second
two
point
other
is,
things?
second point is please make sure that you get into the habit of writing your thoughts
Hmm.
and your emotions, because most people suffer when their emotions are bottled up. Like you have no clue how. So emotion is basically, there's a motion to it. Definitely, if you don't give it an outlet, it will go somewhere, mostly creating the health issues that you're not aware of.
Hmm.
And nobody is immune to it. Like, if you cognitively understand it, it doesn't mean anything. Like
Correct.
I have gone through my own journeys, and if I thought I got it being a coach or whatever studies you have done, it doesn't help. It is the physical outlet that helps. So when you don't want to punch a pillow for a very long time, please get into a habit of journaling and
Correct.
writing your thoughts. That's really helpful. Like a simplest tool I can look at.
Nice.
The third thing is I feel, and you do that a lot, but I feel look at your learning curve.
Hmm.
That's one of the most important skill sets I have learned from many high performers that performers I worked with. They constantly look for where is my next learning curve. And learning curve need not be that perfect idea that you want to become, but what is the process that you're in? It could be, if I picked up cooking last year and that became a new learning curve. But when you learn, you question your ways of thinking on everything, not on that
Correct.
one area.
Correct.
Everything goes through a change. And when you're putting yourself through those uncomfortable journeys, you discover. So that's like how you keep your neurons going, right? You keep
Yes.
yourself activated. If you do not do that, so basically when your brain keeps creating same patterns and if everything becomes familiar, you're disinterested. Most people only require anxieties and, like the external situations to put them into action. And
Very
that's why
interesting.
suddenly, from being like completely comfortable, when they're thrown into it, they don't know how to deal with it. And this is where the problem happens. So if you want
Correct.
your brain to be activated, every day, please keep learning something or other. And ideally, if you not horizontally learning where you learn 15 things, if you pick up one thing, build a journey for say 100 days or 6 months where you actually go deep, because there is a different form of satisfaction when you dive deep.
Yes.
Which shallow snorkeling versus scuba diving. So when you scuba dive, you can see the different world altogether, which is not available to a snorkeler. So that's
Correct.
my request. If you pick up something, give it like every day. Let that thing shape you in ways that you didn't know it can.
Lovely. I love it. So in fact, we've done a podcast on the multi-potentialite, right?
Oh.
Having multiple potentials.
Right.
So because you don't know which of these is going to lead you to your next big thing,
Right.
So having multi-potentialites is far better than having just that one specialization.
I met this couple in 2006. The husband was that time, I think, 85 or 90. And he wrote a book called The New Alchemist. And he interviewed 20 people from London. And he interviewed them from this perspective that, okay, what is that keeps you going? So from Richard Branson to, one Indian finance person. So he interviewed people with curiosity. And his conclusion in one sentence was this. He said, your learning curve is steep only when it is built of multiple learning curves.
There you go.
So if it is only one curve, then you reach a point where you kind of, feel the maturity level and then it droops. But if you have multiple curves, it's the only way it will be steep and you will be at it. It can be in the same field and, as you said, multiple fields. But you have to go deep. You can't be just at a shallow level. Yeah,
you have to take it up that notch.
Yes.
Super, Aditi. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. We're going to be doing another one. And this one is a more personal podcast. I think it's a very, very interesting podcast that's coming up, right? So please do join us for that one. Aditi, thank you so much for being on the Habit Coach podcast.
Thank you so much, Ashdin. This is
I loved it. So many learnings. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome180.
I hope you enjoyed that show. It's been a really fun week this week, as it is almost every week, but this week was particularly fun. Parmesha Honey was on Cyrus Says, great conversation over there. We had a crossover event. Vineet Kanabar, host of the Storytellers and Storytellers podcast, came on Uncle Please Sit. Really interesting conversation about the future of digital content. Besides that, it was the 50th episode this week of Agla Station Adulthood. Congratulations to Ritasha and Ayushi. But yeah, they're 50 episodes down. They had Rekha Jha as the guest on that show. On Advertising is Dead, Varun had the founders of Foxymoron, Suvir Bajaj and Pratik Gupta on. Another really, really interesting conversation. So full of interesting conversations this week, and I hope to see you again next week.
Are you constantly seeking happiness? Wondering how to make the most of every day? How not to let your inhibitions stop you from achieving your goals? It's now time to get your A game on. It's time to unlock your true potential. Tune in to the Empowering series with me, Zarina Poonawalla, to feel empowered in all genres of life. From behavioral skills to management skills. From health to relationships. From mental well-being to emotional well-being. And of course, your finances. I've got you covered. With these tips and tricks from me, Zarina, and true life stories from my amazing guests, you're bound to bring your purest to the table. Tune in to the Empowering series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.